The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I wish I could start the show with better news today. Unfortunately, I can't, or at least I've chosen not to in some kind of arbitrary way. We talked to you in the last few weeks about this Georgia Guns Everywhere bill. This is the bill that would allow people to bring guns into churches, into bars, into other sorts of establishments. And now Republican Georgia Governor Nathan Deal signed the bill into law. We didn't know for sure, although we of course speculated that this would happen earlier. And now it has become the law. It had critics complaining. It of course had proponents absolutely thrilled that they can now bring their firearms into bars and churches. This is House Bill 60, also called the Safe Carry Protection Act of 2014, which sounds a little bit ridiculous to call it that, in my opinion. And this has been called the Guns Everywhere bill, as we've told you about. And it makes it so that people who have concealed carry permits can take guns into some bars, churches, school zones, government buildings, even certain parts of airports. This just sounds great, doesn't it? I feel, Lewis, like I would be so safe in Georgia because of this law.
Right, as if we didn't need another reason to avoid Georgia. I think this is great because I hope that it is a disaster and that we can all point to it and say, this is a terrible idea. Legislation like this is not an answer to our problems. I hope that's what happens.
They signed the bill outdoors, Lewis. Of course, they opened the signing with a prayer. Then they sang the national anthem, followed by a recital of the Pledge of Allegiance. I can only assume with the under God part included. Nathan Deal said it was a great day to affirm our liberties, The idea that in order to achieve liberty, people need to be carrying guns around in more than the previously allowed number of places, specifically into churches and bars, means something is either wrong with them or with our society, or both, right? I mean, liberty is something that is inside of one. And the idea that liberty is fundamentally changed by being able to bring your gun into church means we have some serious issues.
Well, David, a bullet is also something that is inside of one. So perhaps liberty and bullets are just synonymous.
You know, medical marijuana for children having seizures in Georgia, absolutely not. But guns and alcohol in the same place, a resounding yes from Georgia legislatures. Georgia is really becoming a state to be avoided. Fortunately, when it comes to flying, I started thinking, why might I be in Georgia? Atlanta is one of the busiest airports in the country, and Delta has a hub there. Fortunately, I already avoid flying Delta because of their anti-union policies and other policies about how they treat employees. So I guess if I were to fly through that airport, hopefully it would be just for a layover and I wouldn't be in the part of the airport where you're allowed to have the guns. That's I guess, what I'm banking on.
Right. I would assume that those guns are just allowed before a security checkpoint. I mean, we'd be getting into federal versus state law with that. So that's kind of weird. I'm not sure how that will work.
Yeah, I think to be safe, it's probably best to try to avoid flying Delta, avoid flying through Atlanta, and you'll really get the best of both worlds, I guess I would say. So this applies to about 500,000 Georgia residents who have permits of this kind. It's about 5% of their population. And hey, you know, maybe in church there will be some guns now. Maybe that'll make you feel really safe. And if it does, I would continue looking for other ways to feel liberty, because it just doesn't really make any sense to me. It's sad more than anything, and incredibly dangerous, of course. Very, very big verdict when it comes to fracking. A jury ruled this week that a Texas family claiming they were sickened by pollution from hydraulic fracturing operations near their home will be awarded $2.95 million for their troubles, assuming that there is not a successful appeal. This is the Parr family, P-A-R-R. They sued a company called Aruba Petroleum, saying that the oil and gas producer was exposing them to hazardous gases, to chemicals, to industrial waste that seeped into the air from 22 wells that were drilled near the family's land, which sits atop Barnett Shale. The jury came back with a 5-1 verdict. They said Aruba had indeed intentionally created a private nuisance. They awarded $275,000 for losses on property value, $2 million for physical pain and suffering, and $250,000 for future physical pain and suffering, and then add on to that $400,000 for mental anguish, and we've got $2.95 million. The statement that was provided to Think Progress from Aruba said that they were, of course, not happy with the verdict. They didn't say whether they were going to appeal or not. Why is this a big deal? This is a big deal because it's the first time that in a court of law, the effects of fracking, or rather, that fracking operations have been linked to specific detrimental effects to people around that fracking operation. So this really is a big deal because we hear all the time that this doesn't exist, right? These companies would have us believe, Lewis, that there are no risks or dangers. And here we now have legal precedent saying, yes, there are dangers.
Right. I am shocked that it took this long for something like this to happen. For years, we've been seeing the nasty results of fracking, people who can light their tap water on fire, all sorts of nasty things. And I can't believe it took this long for there to be some type of substantial lawsuit and a substantial payout, I should say.
That is one maybe, which is the Earth Justice Managing Attorney Deborah Goldberg said that it is certainly the biggest settlement, if not the first. And also that, as Lewis mentioned, companies have avoided this. And the way they've avoided it is, in their defense, they say it is not possible to definitively link the fracking operation to the health or environmental consequences, that they are kind of able to create this shadow of doubt around that, and therefore legally are not able to be found liable. That's changed here. And we will see if they end up actually collecting the money. As I said, we don't know if there will be an appeal or not. This is a big deal, and it's just more information. I mean, it's like a broken record, Lewis. We don't need to be doing this. We can focus on other types of energy. And my biggest concern with this is that the big companies like Exxon and the Koch brothers companies, they've actually made a strategy out of licensing or outsourcing individual operations to smaller companies like Aruba. I'm not saying that that's the specific case in this particular situation, but we really need to make sure that as this continues, Lewis, the liability should flow up. Forget about trickle down. Let's talk about trickle up from the local contractor to the bigger company.
Right. But it's all this legal stuff makes that probably close to impossible. And that probably is part of the specific reasoning for the Koch brothers doing that type of thing.
Really interesting exchange on the Bill O'Reilly program. Bill O'Reilly invited a Cliven Bundy supporter. Cliven Bundy, of course, the Nevada cattle rancher who is now at the forefront of a militia-toting kind of, gun-toting militia, rather, that is defending his sovereignty to evade the taxes that he's owed for over 20 years. And Bill O'Reilly invited a supporter of his who's involved in one of these militias that's defending him from the federal government. And Bill O'Reilly makes a pretty good point, which it's a good point in some ways and not a good point in other ways. And he says, aren't you guys the same as Occupy Wall Street, whom you completely disagree with? Here's how it went on the Bill O'Reilly program.
What's the difference between Mr. Bundy and the Occupy Wall Street crew that doesn't respect the federal government for a variety of reasons and feels it has the right to go into a city like Oakland and burn things down? What's the difference?
Well, the difference is Mr. Bundy's providing a service to the nation. He's a cattle rancher. He's providing the country with beef. The Occupy movement, to this day, I still don't know what they're providing the country with.
But they're both dissenters. They're both dissenting what they feel is an oppressive system. That's what they have in common.
Okay, yeah, they have that in common. I guess the way they're going about it would be different. I haven't seen any reports from the Bundy Ranch that, any supporters of his are destroying property or being arrested like you saw with the Occupy movement.
Okay. Legitimate point.
Okay, so Shaw's response is basically, well, we're different because Bundy does something good for us and we're not destroying property. Well, They're also different because the militiamen at the Bundy Ranch are walking around with guns, which was not happening at Occupy Wall Street. They're also different in that some of those at the Bundy Ranch threatened to kill law enforcement officials if it came to it. They're also different because Occupy showed up in public places on a temporary basis, not for their own personal profit, while Bundy has been occupying land without paying the fees he owes for decades. So there are some differences, aren't there, Lewis?
There are differences, but as stated in the interview, there are also some similarities. People who are upset with government and think the government is tyrannical or unfair. So we have to address that too.
I would also argue that it's not really fair to say they're both just dissenters, case closed, right? As Bill O'Reilly suggests. Bundy grazed his cattle for decades without paying the fees, lost all of his attempts to get the lack of payment okayed by the legal system. Then, once he faced the consequences, suddenly decides the legal system is completely illegitimate, and he yells for gun-toting militias to show up and wave their guns so oppressors will go away. He's dissenting, I guess, Lewis, from the oppressive system of using public lands at a greatly reduced cost for your own profit. It's not really like Occupy, is it?
No, I also wonder how much it cost taxpayers just with all the legal stuff that was happening between when he first started trying to fight these payments and now. I mean, that's probably pretty substantial too.
Wait, so Lewis, you don't think what Bundy is doing is the exact same thing as protesting because of the systemic inequality of our socioeconomic system, and that those cases aren't being heard by courts and they're basically being completely supported by our plutocratic system? It sounds just like what Bundy is doing.
I'm going to be bold here and say that there's a difference there, David. I'm standing by that.
I think you're going to love this. Now that he's in the national spotlight, tax evading cattle rancher Cliven Bundy is apparently taking this as an opportunity to comment on other matters, including race relations. I don't know if you're going to be surprised by this or not. I just love this. According to a New York Times story that was published yesterday, Bundy made some racially charged, to use an incredible understatement, some racially charged comments about government assistance in a recent press conference. He's been doing news conferences every single day. And he said, prepare yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Cliven Bundy, okay? I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro. It's already incredible, right? I could stop now. We don't even have to read the rest of it. It's already amazing, but I'll go on. I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro. He was talking about a government house in Las Vegas where he recalled that people sat outside seemingly with nothing to do. And because they were basically on government subsidy, so now what do? They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. This is just amazing. And I've often wondered, are they better off as slaves picking cotton and having a family life and doing things? Or are they better off under government subsidy? They didn't get no more freedom. They got less freedom. I've now eliminated all doubts whatsoever that Cliven Bundy is absolutely psychopathic. I had a sense of it, right, from the delusions of grandeur around mounting a gun-toting militia around taxes he's been choosing not to pay for decades. But now this really confirms it. And I mean, Negroes would be better off as cotton-picking slaves. This is the guy right-wing media is cheerleading.
I think what we need to do more than anything right now is get Cliven Bundy and Glenn Miller in the same room together. I think that should be our highest priority. But you know what? Good for this guy. He's got a platform now, as they say, and he can say whatever he wants and everyone's going to hear it. So good for him.
So the Times reached out to people that have been supporting Bundy, like, for example, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, Senator Dean Heller from Nevada, and they've been supporting Cliven Bundy. A spokesman for Heller, who called Bundy and his supporters patriots, told the Times that on this particular issue, he completely disagrees with Mr. Bundy's appalling and racist statements and condemns them in a strenuous way. I'm not sure why it takes so much strain to condemn racism, but okay, at least he condemns it. Rand Paul said through a spokesman, Bundy's remarks on race are offensive, and I wholeheartedly disagree with him. No comment from Sean Hannity, one of the big Bundy cheerleaders on this so far. Honestly, is anybody shocked by this? Seriously, cutting out the BS of just how appalling the comments are. Can anyone say they're totally shocked that Cliven Bundy feels this way about black people?
I'm sure some people are saying that. I hope. I doubt he had any Negro militiamen with him there at the ranch.
No, actually, I actually think he probably does have token black people there, right? Because you always have to say, no, I don't have a problem with black people in general. As former neo-Nazi Frank Mink told me yesterday, he always had the exceptions, the guys that were cool, right? And I'm sure Cliven Bundy also has them.
Maybe. I don't know. All I know is what he said here, and it's very telling.
Is there some other irony, Lewis, to a guy mooching off the American people and not paying his bills, criticizing others who are on welfare?
There's an interesting double standard there. Yeah, I think there is.
All right, we're going to take a break. Please join us on Reddit. You can talk to us on Reddit, suggest stories for the show. Go to davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. It's growing every day, Lewis. It's a lot of activity going on there. We'll take a break. We'll be back after this. We have an excellent show planned for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We're mostly funded by individual members, and our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. If you're worried about liberal bias in statistics, facts, other reality-based things, check out how to unskew reality at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Heather Miller. Heather, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Heather gets the bonus show. Heather is able to partake in the David Pakman Show town halls like we had earlier in the week. We'll be posting the entire thing to YouTube pretty soon, and a whole bunch of other great member benefits. So Heather, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Heather at davidpakman.com/membership. I will make a recommendation today. Sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's a website. Today it's a documentary film. That film is called Waiting for Armageddon. This is a film that follows both evangelical Christians as well as Orthodox Jews around the world, essentially. And they are following specifically believers who think we are close to the end times. They believe Armageddon is near, and they are making plans for Armageddon. This is a just fascinating documentary. It does stream on Netflix. It's probably available elsewhere as well. It's structured around 4 stages of the apocalypse: rapture, tribulation, Armageddon, and millennialism. You have to be prepared to see this, Lewis. As you know, when you watch Jesus Camp, you have to be in the right mood. You can't just watch this at any point. And this is just an excellent film, but it is incredibly shocking and disturbing as well.
Right, like most of those documentaries about religious extremists or religious fundamentalists, I guess you could say. But yeah, this one's right up there with Jesus Camp, I would say.
It also has a lot of those extreme Christians who are they claim to kind of be all about Jews, but they're really these Jews they're not Jews for Jesus. They're kind of like Christians for Jews. They think that Jews are going to be converted to Christians right at the end times. I mean, it's craziness, okay? And I encourage you to watch it. Send me your thoughts about it. Waiting for Armageddon. And of course, if you have any other suggestions for documentaries that we should check out and maybe recommend, send them in. A lot of these, Lewis, we actually hear about from the audience.
Yeah. Like as with bonus show stories and sometimes even regular stories, if you have ideas for us, send them. It doesn't matter what it is.
Remember that whole thing about how the IRS was disproportionately scrutinizing conservative groups and their nonprofit status? Darrell Issa went completely bonkers, about as bonkers as he went over Benghazi, calling for all sorts of investigations, spending millions of dollars. There's a new series of IRS documents that have been revealed, and they've been provided to Think Progress under a FOIA request. They appear to contradict the claims made by Congressman Darrell Issa and his House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And it seems that those the IRS provided these heavily redacted documents to Think Progress. And from the earliest lists through 2012, the historical section of the lists encouraged reviewers to watch out for progressive groups with names that included, for example, Blue, Act Blue, Unite Blue, because these might be inappropriately, in other words, those groups should probably not or may not qualify for nonprofit status. There are explicit references to Tea Party included in emerging issues. That's a section in the lists. That started in August of 2010, but stopped in May of 2011 from appearing on that list. And from that point on, the list instructed agents to flag all political advocacy groups of any stripe. Those who don't believe in these documents are saying two things. One, oh, the documents were obviously doctored. Or number two, okay, the documents show that, but there was this kind of unspoken policy of targeting conservative groups. Of course, when we actually analyze what groups lost or had their nonprofit status challenged, there is zero evidence that conservative groups were actually targeted. Is this going to convince too many people, Lewis? I think some people will be open to this data because there is not as much. It's often with the social issues that conflicting data has absolutely no impact on your point of view because you're just so invested in whatever it is that you're already bringing in. But I think with something like this, people may actually, not Darrell Issa, of course, but some people may actually be swayed by this data.
Perhaps. Of course, the nature of IRS auditing and investigations is that these organizations and these companies are being targeted. I mean, you have to use that word targeted because the IRS goes after you, the IRS is targeting you. And so if the IRS does happen to target a few Tea Party organizations, especially one that you're tied to, I don't think you're going to have a very positive opinion of the IRS or your government for perhaps the rest of your life.
And people are completely missing the forest for the trees with this because we have a really serious issue in this country with both political groups and churches that are doing political advocacy getting a nonprofit status that they should not have and do not deserve. This is a separate issue from whether churches should have nonprofit status at all. I'm not even touching that. What I'm specifically talking about is the churches that we know are doing political advocacy. That's really the huge problem in this country. And factually speaking, based on the data, empirically speaking, most churches that are advocating political stances are conservative leaning. I mean, that's just a fact.
Right. I think it's really getting to the point where we just should not have any tax exempt organizations. I mean, I don't know how else to deal with it because
but Lewis, what about an organization like the Boys and Girls Club that is doing no politics? They are truly a nonprofit. I don't think we should have no nonprofits, but if you're doing anything political, you shouldn't have that status.
Well, that goes without saying, but there's a lot of gray area. I mean, where it's hard to draw the line with a lot of these companies, and there are a lot of these organizations who are getting away with it because it's so blurry.
The Republican race problem is getting much worse. In 2012, roughly 9 out of 10 people who voted for Mitt Romney were white. Even as the white vote continues to become a smaller and smaller part of the overall vote with each election cycle, among Hispanic voters and African American voters, Mitt Romney just got absolutely crushed. And we've spoken on this program for several years now about how with the increase of the non-white population, Republicans are going to need a higher and higher portion of the white vote with each subsequent election cycle to remain competitive if they don't start appealing more to non-white voters. Writing at Commentary Magazine a couple of days ago, former Bush administration official Pete Wehner concluded, listen to this, it's an undeniable empirical truth that the GOP coalition is shrinking, and it's shrinking in the aftermath of 2 fairly decisive defeats with the latter coming against a president whose policies were judged by many Americans to have been failures, which means the Republican task isn't simply to nominate a candidate who can fire up the base. It's to find principled conservative leaders who can win over voters who are now voting for the GOP at the presidential, who are not now voting for the GOP at the presidential level. Looking at the 2016 election, these demographic shifts are already going to make things pretty difficult for Republicans who have this we depend on white people strategy. Imagine in 2020, in 2024, and in 2028, Lewis, the current Republican coalition cannot win presidential elections. It's just mathematically not possible.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Like we just talked about with Jeb Bush yesterday, he is really trying to appeal to the Hispanics, and we'll see what happens. But it does look like the Republicans are on a path of no return, if you will.
And if you look at this map that we have here, if you're watching the program, if you look at where the under 20 years old minority populations live, because remember, as we have the aging out of white conservative voters and we have a demographic shift towards young minority voters, the under 20 minority population is our predictor of the future. This is very heavily in red states, Lewis, and this really doesn't bode well for Republicans in states like Atlanta and Texas, where we're already seeing a purpleization of the electorate. This really could be trouble for Republicans. Hopefully, the best possible outcome is the entire political system moves to the left, and we just have more progressive elected officials. And if we get campaign finance reform, we may actually be able to see someone other than a Democrat or Republican who is truly a progressive start making a dent in the system we have. But now I'm jumping many, many steps ahead.
Yeah, I think the Republicans will be around for a while. I think they're just going to have a very hard time at the national level. But I think that what's going to happen is you're just going to start seeing some Democrats that have that are far more to the left, and they will be more viable candidates, I think, as we go forward.
The other thing we can absolutely be sure of, Lewis, is that gerrymandering, voter suppression, and prohibiting college students from voting at college are going to be even more important to Republicans in upcoming elections.
Unfortunately, these are the keys to winning elections. I'm not kidding. That they need to do this stuff.
Yeah, demographically. I mean, the data shows it's not hyperbole. Just demographically, they depend on that stuff because they now need to spend probably decades convincing blacks, Asians, Hispanics that they're not racist and that their policies don't go against what is in the best interest of those groups. And that's going to take a while. Certainly, like I said, could be a 10 or 20 year period. So in the interim, keep gerrymandering, keep passing these voter suppression laws meant to prevent voter fraud, which is almost non-existent. We'll take a break. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. And plenty more coming up today. Glad you're with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
For our New England viewers and audience, Tom Hartman, who is the most listened to progressive talk radio host in the country, has a new book called The Crash of 2016. He's going to be reading from the book in Northampton, Massachusetts on May 10th. I will be introducing Tom. Tom will read from the book, and then I'll moderate some Q&A. There is a requirement to have tickets. The tickets are free, but you have to sign up for them at our local affiliate, WHMP.com. Big banner in the middle of the page with Tom's face and name on it. I'll be there. I'll be introducing him. Then we'll do Q&A. It should be a great evening. It'll be May 10th. I think it's around 7 or 8 at night in Northampton, Massachusetts. I already got a bunch of emails from people saying they'll be coming, including some people from Connecticut and I think Vermont as well. So that'll be great. Check it out. Sign up. Get the tickets. WHMP.com. A 19-year-old Tennessee woman was reportedly found with a loaded handgun hidden in her vagina when she was called into the local police station to investigate a driving violation. Her name is Dallas Archer, which is almost as equally unbelievable as the fact that she had a gun in her vagina. I mean, it's just like it sounds like a fake name, doesn't it, Lewis?
Right. It sounds like possibly a I don't know, music personality or a sports star or something incredible like that.
Dallas Archer was being booked at a Kingsport jail for driving with a suspended license. While searching her, a female corrections officer discovered an unknown object in her nether regions, the smoking gun is reporting. The officer and a female cop took Archer into the bathroom for a more thorough search. They found a 4-inch North American Arms 22 LR revolver loaded, which was concealed in her vagina. She already has a storied criminal record despite her age. She's been charged with aggravated assault, domestic vandalism for allegedly choking her mother, and then pouring bleach on the clothes in her bedroom. She also is now charged with a suspended license, possession of a stolen firearm, and this is just crazy, Lewis. I mean, how can you even imagine this? Investigating the weapon, police found that the 5-shot mini revolver had been stolen from an auto burglary in 2013, and it belongs to a 70-year-old retired car salesman, John Souther. When he was told where the gun was, his reaction was, "Oh gosh." He went on to say he would like the little fella back, but not before it would be bathed in bleach. Looking at the mugshot of this woman, if I were at the police station, once I know she put one gun in her vagina, I would check her hair for another gun, because you could definitely hide one in there.
Right. We're talking about a pretty small gun here, too. It's quite the story. I don't know. I guess after putting guns up there multiple times, it becomes easier and just a normal hiding place. I don't know.
Is the song Love Gun by the band Kiss actually a prophetic tale about Ms. Archer?
I don't listen to Kiss. I think they're highly overrated.
Yeah, I don't like Kiss either.
But this is incredible, right? And, the thing about keeping guns in your car like this, I know a lot of people do. But if someone knows you have a gun in your car, it becomes a pretty easy target.
Has the NRA found its new advertising campaign for getting women to buy more guns? I know that Trojan is loving this. Trojan has now announced they're developing a bulletproof condom in response to this story, which is an amazing product.
Sounds pretty uncomfortable, to be honest.
Okay, let's follow up on that story from Latta, South Carolina, where Mayor Earl Bullard fired Police Chief Crystal Moore last week after issuing her 7 reprimands in one day, which happened to be the only reprimands she received in her 20-year career with the Latta police force. It turned out, and the all reasonable indications are that actually homophobia was the reason for the firing. There's a city councilor who recorded Mayor Bullard talking about how the chief's lifestyle is disgusting and his sexual orientation, and how he would much rather have someone who is a drunk alcoholic taking care of his kid than someone who is a lesbian. Well, the city council there has now voted to unanimously support fired police chief Crystal Moore by delaying the hiring of a new police chief, I think for 60 days initially, or 60 days or 2 months. And what's fascinating to me is this actually doesn't seem like it's happening because of an overwhelming support for LGBT rights in Latta, South Carolina, although for some people, clearly that's important. It's really happening because this was a police chief that seems to be well respected, and her sexual orientation just wasn't an issue, which is actually the way it should be.
Right. That seems to make a lot more sense. I mean, it's just far better to keep someone in office or in the police department because they're good at their job instead of just because they happen to be of a sexual orientation that you think needs to be prominent.
But by the way, Lewis, how backwards do you have to be to prefer drunks watch your kids than a responsible woman who happens to be a lesbian?
I think you have to be, I don't know, insane or I don't know, or you just are very fond of drunks. I'm not really sure.
Here's the last bit of data on this. Last week, the council voted in favor of a referendum that would actually weaken the power of the mayor's office and strengthen the power of the city council. There will be a vote on this by city residents 60 days from now. It would be so epic if the mayor's power is reduced altogether as a result of this boneheaded move, where the mayor can still be the mayor, but they're just not going to be able to do very much.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be able to fire people at will for no reason. So if that's something that gets changed, that's for the better.
Remember, it is legal to fire people in South Carolina for being gay. But in spite of that, those aren't the reasons that were stated by the mayor, which I guess is progress. He at least feels guilty enough not to say he's firing her for being gay. He's only doing it and citing other reasons. It's a tiny baby step in the right direction. Let's take a break. Make sure to check out Patreon, patreon.com/David Pakman Show. It's a cool new way to support the work we do on YouTube. That's patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Back after this with more stories as well as your voicemails.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Virginia State Police showed up to raid the wrong apartment and then tied up the 75-year-old woman that they found inside. She says she was tied up for the duration of a Virginia State Police raid on her apartment. Virginia State Police say, hey, we executed a search warrant at the Henrico apartment of Ruth Hunter as part of a drug investigation. Hunter says that state police burst through the door in the morning. She thought someone had broken into her apartment to rob or kill her. She didn't know what was going on. Eventually, the officers identified her. Quote, they took my hands with a zip tie thing and said, you're under arrest, and started asking questions. The more I told them I didn't know these people, the more he continued. Hunter said police told her what they were looking for, but she insisted she had nothing to do with this drug investigation. They asked me if I had ever stored drugs for anybody, and I said, how dare you insult my integrity? She said police suggested that her granddaughter might be involved in the case, and that really made her angry. Eventually, state police arrested a man who lives 2 doors down from her, and his fiancée said, it seems like authorities just went to Ms. Hunter's house by mistake. Just so happened they came to the apartment and they got it mixed up. That's according to the woman who asked to remain anonymous. Police aren't commenting, Lewis. The warrant issued by a magistrate lists Hunter's address and apartment number, but it also shows police found nothing inside her home. Where are all the people that show up to support Clive and Bundy when this is going on, right? Shouldn't they be showing up to help this woman? I mean, I know she's black, and Bundy did say black people or the Negro may be better off as slaves, but you'd think that they would be there for the cause. I guess not.
Yeah, we've done stories like this before where people break into, police break into the wrong apartment. And I just don't understand how this happens. I mean, if you are taking the time to organize this entire thing and break into someone's house on a drug raid, you would think you would get the number right. It's incredible.
Reportedly, though, no ham sandwiches were found, Lewis. That's a good thing. People loved that yesterday, Lewis referring to a ham sandwich, of course, a gun that police carry around and then place on a victim to make it look like they had the gun. People just absolutely feverish, Lewis, about your use of the term ham sandwich. By the way, all of this, of course, in the name of the war on drugs, and that's an hour right there. But just as a little reminder, right, Lewis, all of this entire thing premised on the war on drugs.
Right. And it wouldn't surprise me if this was over, a pound of pot or something like that. It's incredible the lengths we go to stop what, I don't know, first of all, what you can't stop and just how damaging it is to everyone involved.
We've talked about the Mars One project to send this one-way mission to Mars and create a human colony there. And now the chief of NASA, Charles Bolden, says a manned mission to Mars is necessary for our species to survive. He's putting together a 3-step plan to send humans to Mars by 2030. To achieve this, he says, he put together these kind of stepping stones, and this includes lassoing an asteroid. We've talked about that on the world famous bonus show. Also about bringing the asteroid to the moon's orbit by 2015, growing plants in space using 3D printers for onboard repairs. He was speaking at the Humans to Mars Summit, and he said if this species is to survive indefinitely, we need to become a multi-planet species. We need to go to Mars, and Mars is a stepping stone to other solar systems. He was critical, or rather, he said that it is critical to these plans to get more funding from the White House. We've spoken with Neil deGrasse Tyson about the lack of funding that we're experiencing right now. This is hugely exciting, Lewis, and at the same time, my only concern is I don't want people to get so lost in the possibilities of interstellar colonization that we completely throw caring for this planet out the window, which we already know is an issue when we talk about the climate change debate.
Yeah, it's almost too late for that. I mean, I understand exactly what he's saying when he says this is necessary for human survival. I'm curious to see what happens with the NASA plan, but Mars One, of course, plans to already be on Mars by the time NASA plans on getting
Yeah,
there.
I wonder if from NASA's point of view, they just assume that Mars One is not going to make it there, or if they would see it as a potential conflict or what would eventually happen. The next 10 or 15 years could get really interesting if we do actually have multiple viable Mars trips that start to take shape.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens. Of course, Mars One, that's supposed to be happening very soon. I hope everything goes well.
Let's go to some of your voicemails. You can leave us voicemail any time of day, 24 hours a day. Call 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is one voicemail. Let's take a listen to this.
Hey guys, this is GB. I've been struggling with something besides my ratings. It's something I haven't spoken of, nor will I. It's just too frightening. But I will allude to it now and then to keep people listening. It's something I have avoided at every turn, if you ignore my entire career. For 2 months now, I've been arguing with God because I have that kind of a relationship with Him, because we're equals. I know it's been said falsely for almost 2,000 years, but we are entering dangerous times. If the David Pakman Show moves to 5 days a week,
Right.
we are all doomed. God help us.
Yeah, I guess, it sounds more to me, not so much like Glenn Beck, but like The Honest Economist. But I know that there are fears about the David Pakman Show going to 5 days a week. We'll have an announcement about that, I think, next week. So Glenn Beck / Honest Economist, thank you for that message. Let's listen to one more voicemail here.
I really enjoyed the FaceTime with you guys last night. I think I should probably sign in with the Skype, though, so that you can see me, too, to see some of the people.
This is Heather, by the way, commenting on any number of issues.
So one thing, I want you to keep using the swastikas and whatever images you need that are relevant to the stories, and keep it up for as long as you need to, because whether or not my neighbors see whatever images they see when they're looking in my windows, I can't control what my neighbors think, quite frankly, and it's not really my job to try to control what my neighbors think. So maybe you need to talk about smart and sexy breastfeeding, and you need a pair of great big fat titties up there, because this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, okay, well, Rick from Downey had called and said he didn't want us keeping swastikas or schwastikas, as Heather refers to them, up too long on the screen. But Heather is saying she's okay with whatever images we need to correlate with the story. So conflicting views on this, Lewis.
It's a heated debate. We're still working on it.
Okay, on today's bonus show. What is the bonus show, by the way? When this program ends, there's another show, which is for our members. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Lewis will tell us about the New York Police Department's latest public relations fail. Here's a hint. It involves tweets and pictures. The IRS hands out bonuses to employees who didn't pay taxes. What's that all about? And Lewis will tell us about a pocket printer. A pocket printer. That sounds interesting. Being in New York City, I know all about pocket speakers, where you're walking around down the street and you walk by someone and there's music that's coming from their body and they have a pocket speaker. It's pretty annoying, I'm not going to lie. Pocket printers, on the other hand, I haven't yet heard of. That's all on today's bonus show and more. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. That does it for today. But fortunately, Monday, we will be back with a brand new program, a great week of interviews planned next week. Join us on Facebook, of course, facebook.com/David Pakman Show, and we will talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.